All right, there we go. Let's roll. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to a CI Chit Chat. Good to be here with you today and talking about some of the latest going on with carbon intensity and the 45Z program and just the whole world of carbon intensity, sustainability, variety of different things happening. It's been an interesting couple weeks, but let me set the stage like we always do. We're talking CI, that's carbon intensity, really being driven by the 45Z tax credit for low carbon biofuel production. It was part of the Inflation Reduction Act. And when Trump came in, he paused the Inflation Reduction Act, and they're working through a lot of these different programs. And in particular, 45Z has really good bipartisan support. And I've had multiple different conversations here recently where folks are saying, hey, now 45Z is, really in a pretty good spot, and a lot of people are in support of it and they see it continuing to move forward. So that's been really encouraging. And maybe let me start there with a bit of a story. Last week, we didn't have the chit chat. I was in Washington, D.C. early last week. Had the honor of speaking at the Agri-Pulse conference. I spoke at it 2 years ago. And at the conference 2 years ago, I asked the audience to raise their hand if they had heard of 45Z. So this would have been March of 2023. The Inflation Reduction Act passed in August of 2022. March of 2023, I was in DC speaking at AgriPulse, big time ag policy conference, and there's, I don't know, 350, 400 people in the room that are all very involved in ag policy. And March of 2023, I was on a young farmer panel and talking about the future of ag and things that we're monitoring that are exciting in the future of ag. And 2 years ago, I said, raise your hand if you've heard of 45Z. In the whole room of hundreds of people that are involved in ag policy, 9 hands went up. Hardly anybody in that audience knew what 45Z was. That's what, like 2% of the people. And at that point, I said 45Z is the most important piece of ag policy that is going down in DC, in my opinion, as far as being able to drive conservation ag adoption and just the potential for disruption that it could make would be just absolutely huge. So that was 2 years ago. Um, Fast forward to now, I was in DC because we were having an entire panel and a huge part of the meeting talking about 45Z and biofuel policy. And so that's where they invited me back out to speak about it. And when I was introduced, I asked the same question. I go, just humor me, people, and show with a show of hands who here knows about 45Z, and nearly every hand in the room went up. So really cool to see that shift and people getting a better understanding of the potential impact that 45Z can have. My takeaway from being in DC, other than, of course, that story and more people acutely aware of 45Z, is that even folks that are out in DC, lobbyists and stuff, I was really surprised at their optimism around 45Z. I thought that there was going to be more skepticism in terms of this administration not necessarily wanting to do anything with it. So it was really encouraging to hear a fairly positive outlook on 45Z. So that was really refreshing. Obviously, it's been fairly disheartening couple months in the 45Z space with things just not getting done and not pulling through the way that we need. And so that was really encouraging to see the see it be talked about positively and folks saying that they think that it is gonna happen. But we will see. So the things that are happening within 45Z is that last week the public comment period closed for the USDA public comment. So before the Biden administration left office, they did get some material published, right? One of the things that they did, I believe, was on January 17th, might have been the 16th. But at last couple of days before January 20th and inauguration, the Biden USDA and the Department of Energy released some of their latest updates about 45Z. Included in that was the Department of Energy's 45Z CF GREET model, but that CF GREET model did not include a feedstock calculator. The USDA put out their proposed, guidance for defining carbon intensity of biofuel feedstocks, and they did put out a feedstock calculator called the USDA FDCIC, or Feedstock Carbon Intensity Calculator, and they opened up a 60-day public comment period. So we and many others commented in that. Let me share the link to you all if you would like to see some of those comments. There it is in the chat. Um, so far, there's been 114. It looks like maybe going to be around 120 comments total that came in. So pretty good. But a lot of you uh, made your voices heard, which is much appreciated. And in my quick look through the comments, I've only made it through a portion of them, but it seemed like there was a resonating theme to utilize a book and claim approach, get rid of the USDA feedstock calculator, simplify some of the farmer data collection and the audit process, all things that we were really touting and really pushing for. In previous public comment periods, we were really pushing for no bundles, no bundles, no bundles, because in the 40B guidance, the USDA and the Department of Treasury demanded that there be a bundle of practices used. And at that point, it was cover crops, no-till, and using enhanced efficiency nitrogen fertilizers for corn. And it was cover crops and no-till for beans. And obviously, we like those practices, but forcing people to adopt them in a bundle and having these type of programs be an all or nothing approach, either do all the practices or you get nothing. That's just not how we think that this should be done. And adopting some of these practices can take time, and some of them can be a challenge if you don't know what you're doing. And that's why we're trying to help provide farmers with that agronomic advice that they need to be successful in adopting these practices and chasing some of these new carrots. So our message at that point has been no bundles, no bundles, no bundles. And now, in some of the USDA's talk, they did listen and they went away with the bundle approach. So that's great, but they only added a couple additional practices, and there's some major, major flaws with their USDA feedstock calculator. And so us and many other folks that provided public comment said, "Hey, don't worry about doing this different feedstock calculator. Just utilize the GREET feedstock calculator that's already there." So hopefully that's what happens. So we were pushing for just use the GREET feedstock calculator that's already there. That would clear things up in regards to manure, in regards to yield and having good productivity, in regards to actual fertilizer rates, fertilizer type. That opens up the opportunity to enable biologicals and stabilizers and stuff to help. They don't create a direct CI impact, but it's the outcome of better yield, lower fertilizer input that improves your CI score and therefore opens up a wide array of different practices to be utilized in conjunction with a more holistic regenerative management system. So, long story short, USDA public comment period closed. It's been 60 days, since they published their initial stuff. 100 and some of us submitted comment. Thanks to all who did. Hopefully our message is heard. I don't know, who at USDA is going to be working on this stuff or what some of the next steps are. But I have to assume basically no work has been done between January 20th and now. I definitely haven't heard of anything really happening as far as pen to paper. Now, hopefully, some of that can start picking up. However, the IRS public comment period is still open, and that's open till April 10th. And that's really going to be the next steps. We've started formulating our talking points here at Continuum, and we hope that you all will make your voice heard once again to the IRS. The major issue that we're going to be looking at from the IRS public comment is when they publish their draft guidance and their intent to propose guidance, they really didn't even talk about the feedstocks at all. They didn't give any guidance as to how they're going to factor in the feedstock. And I've told this story before, but I think what was screwed up is the IRS and Department of Treasury jumped the gun and they published their comments on January 10th. The USDA and Department of Energy stuff didn't come out until the following week on the 16th or 17th of January. And because the IRS went first, they didn't make any mention of the USDA guidelines. And that would have given tremendous clarity that their intent is to rely on the USDA to provide the guidelines as to how to include the feedstock into the 45Z calculation. In the case of most of us, the feedstock for the biofuel being corn or soybeans. But they published their stuff first and they didn't mention the USDA guidance. They did mention the 45Z CF GREET model. And when I asked one of Secretary Vilsack's higher ranking folks when this was all going down, I'm like, why did they not just wait a little bit or just mention, hey, the USDA is going to handle the feedstock piece, look at their document, and that's how, we say just utilize that. And the response I got was, well, they didn't want to reference a document that hadn't been published yet. And I said, well, why did they reference the 45Z CF GREET model? It hasn't been published yet either. And to which my contact there was laughing and just laughing at the hypocrisy of, doing one or saying one thing and doing another. But point being is that IRS public comment period is a 90-day public comment period. And currently in their draft guidance, they really don't speak to the feedstocks at all. They don't speak to book and claim or mass balance or a feedstock, carbon intensity calculator. So that's where it's fairly a blank slate right now, that they really didn't give much guidance on any of that stuff. So that's where we're gonna be urging them to just they can utilize an ISO 14065 protocol, and they can utilize some of the USDA MRV protocol or MRV recommendations. They can utilize some of that to ease in the process, but we'll encourage them utilize a book and claim approach to bring farmers to the table, utilize the GREET feedstock calculator in the statute from Congress. It says that a calculator developed by the Argonne National Lab should be used for 45Z. So, I mean, it's already in the statute that they should be using a GREET feedstock calculator anyway, or a calculator developed by Argonne. USDA should absolutely be involved. Of course, they're the ag experts, but just what they put out with restricted amount of time is just not conducive. It's just not going to get people excited and get 45Z off the ground, and that's of course what we want. And we want a wide array of practices to be eligible. We want farmers to be able to easily participate. We want all farmers to have a level playing field, which is where book and claim comes in. And we don't want livestock producers to be penalized for feeding their grain to their livestock versus having to truck their grain to a biofuel producer and having to buy somebody else's grain. So book and claim, use the GREET feedstock calculator. It'll be a lot of the same general talking points as what we did the USDA, but it's just got to be reframed and expanded upon for the IRS. So we'll try to get that out as soon as we can and provide you all, with the links and stuff via email, just like we did last time. That if you would like to put in your public comment, I think it goes a long way to ensure that these folks are hearing the excitement coming from ag. They're hearing your interest in participating, and they want to hear your stories. And I think we saw a lot of that in the public comment. A lot of you did a really, really good job. And there was a couple people that said, just do what Mitch Hora and Continuum Ag say. I appreciate it. I'm flattered, but having your own story is really, I think, going to resonate the most. And be able to tell your unique story and share your comments. My opinions are just my opinions, and hopefully they can help you formulate your own, but ultimately it's, tell your story and share your interest. So with that being said, April 10th is the public comment period closing. Then hopefully some folks in DC can actually start working on this. They can put pencil to paper and start reworking the actual program. Hopefully we get some movement on that maybe this summer. I don't know. Um, but gosh darn, at least to know that some people are actually working on it and making progress and that's going to happen, that would be tremendous, to be able to see that come through. And that's what we'll be pushing for. I'm sure I'll be back in DC plenty of times. And, we want to keep pushing on our elected officials in Congress to do their part to protect 45Z and do their part to keep pushing on the administration to get this done and follow the law. It was supposed to be done on December 31st, and it's not. So, we want to keep pushing on our elected officials to get this going and try to encourage the appointed folks at Treasury and USDA and Energy to get this done the right way to really encourage a lot of adoption. So, with that being said, we're also looking at a lot of alternatives, and I wanted to share a little bit of that. Obviously, I've been very focused on 45Z and really trying to push that through. I see it as the best carrot. I see it as by far the biggest financial opportunity for biofuel producers, for farmers, and other stakeholders. Um, I see it as by far the biggest opportunity to drive the adoption of soil health building practices, which is what I ultimately care about. And but it's slow and it's just not there yet. So we're having a lot of conversations and trying to find alternatives. We have participated in that space already with different carbon insets and alternative sustainability programs. They're just small and fairly few and far between right now, so there needs to be more opportunity in that space. A key update that I've barely been able to read into here so far, but something that happened recently is that SBTI, which is the Science-Based Target Initiatives, they just published some of their updated guidance to their corporate players as to how they should be factoring and accounting for their net zero targets. And SBTI is more of a global initiative and global effort for corporates to work towards decarbonization. And basically, it's these SBTI folks, they set the rules as to how you should be quantifying and tracking progress towards meeting your science-based target initiative goals. Most of those goals being around becoming net zero by whatever date you want to choose. And it's way more complicated than that. I'm definitely not a SBTI expert. I'm just starting to look into it more. I haven't really pursued that angle very much because the scope three, the supply chain, it's been kind of unclear about how that would really factor in. Most of these SBTI things are about buying carbon credits and kind of playing that game, and we just have mostly stayed away from participating in those type of initiatives. However, this new SBTI guidance opened up some opportunity for utilizing book and claim approaches to decarbonizing scope three and decarbonizing supply chains. Opened up new flexibility and they started their own public comment period for the public to be able to give feedback about this updated SBTI protocol. Most of the time when I've been talking with corporates about how we are helping farmers to manage our data and creating these verified CI certificates, most of the time they're like, well, yeah, but based on SBTI, we can't actually really utilize that stuff. And we need, carbon credits and to go through these other calculators and this big long rigmarole. And at the end of the day, there's there's no money to be had by anybody and no effort, nothing really gets done. And so it sounds like that's why SBTI is re-looking at some of their re-looking at some of their guidance. I was reading stuff that, they just want to encourage more participation. They want to encourage um, more effort, I guess, and more progress. And so they know that the rules need to be adjusted and they need to learn and adapt and improve systems over time. And so it sounds like that's what they're trying to do. So I got a lot to learn in that space, in the SBTI space. If other folks are more in that space, I would love to chat. or if you're, talking with different corporates or players who are trying to navigate that space and they want farmers to be part of their SBTI solutions, it looks like that door may be opening for us to be able to try to help more companies decarbonize even beyond the biofuel space. And we've got to stay mostly focused on corn and soybeans, of course, but I don't know. I see the world maybe going more and more towards carbon intensity, calculations and inset type initiatives and working with folks in their supply chain to decarbonize, especially farmers, right? So just something that I'm monitoring and just trying to look beyond 45Z, that I'm still hopeful that 45Z is going to happen, but it's not the only thing. It's not the end all be all. And there is other efforts that look like they're making some decent progress, that maybe there will be opportunity there for farmers to be part of the solution. Because right now, in pretty much all these all these initiatives, these companies have to basically utilize default numbers to account for the feedstocks, or account for corn and soybeans and other stuff in their supply chain. They've never really been able to get real data. And again, it looks like some things are starting to happen there in a positive direction to enable farmers to tell their actual story and be part of these companies' decarbonization or sustainability efforts. So that's really encouraging. Also, I'd point to, I had a nice webinar yesterday with Jim Ram from EcoEngineers. They were our third party auditor and are our third party auditor, amongst others, to verify the carbon intensity scores, or they basically audit the CI scores and audit our process. And we passed that audit. It's, as far as I know, still the first and only issuance of verified CI certificates utilizing the ISO 14064 standard, 14065. And the conversation with Jim was really awesome. It'll be up on our YouTube page and on the Topsoil podcast, where you can listen to it. And Jim was also really talking about just seeing the world moving more in this direction around carbon intensity scoring, and just because it would be easier and more streamlined for companies to quantify the actual carbon footprint of the products in their supply chain versus trying to do their carbon accounting based on just carbon credits and tons of carbon. So that was really interesting to hear somebody that's in that audit space and monitoring a lot of these different programs saying, hey, I think Continuum and their farmers are onto something here. Obviously, we're very early. Obviously, the money is not really flowing yet. The standards and systems aren't really there, but things are moving in the right direction. And I thought Jim laid it out nice, where he talked that usually the process in these type of things is that Congress, in a regulated system, right? Congress or somebody sets the initial high level initiative, then the regulators, in the case of 45Z, the Department of Treasury, the regulators set the rules. Then industry determines how to implement the rules and determines what good looks like, and determines, how this can actually be implemented in the real world. And what's happening with 45Z is that Congress set the initial targets. The regulators have not set and finalized the rules, but industry is moving forward anyway. And we've already been able to prove and determine what good looks like, and basically helping then the regulators to give them proof that this can be done. Here's an example. Here's what good can look like. Here's a scalable solution that can help, to prove that there is interest and prove that this is working. And Jim gave examples about how, the process to rolling something out isn't always linear. And he's seen this done in the past with some of the QREMs, is what he had referenced, that they were basically already doing it in the free market. Then the regulation came in and basically helped to support what they had already developed. So I don't know what'll happen here, but I think being able to prove that there is good effort taking place and prove that we are crossing the T's and dotting the I's, hopefully is encouraging to the regulators to get things set, get things launched in a way that that we're just kind of full speed ahead right out the gate. It's obviously why we're investing so heavy early on. So, wide array of things that are pushing forward. It's still going to take a lot of time before more efforts really come to fruition. Not hearing a whole lot right now from the biofuel producers. The as far as any new programs or new projects that are being rolled out, everyone's just kind of unfortunately in a bit of a holding pattern. But interesting to see SBTI and some of these global efforts making some progress forward. So that's cool. As we wrap, I want to definitely give a shout out to our Topsoil Summit, which is coming up on June 3rd. Make sure you get that on your calendar. So that'll be here in Southeast Iowa, Riverside on June 3rd. There'll be more info coming out about that very soon. And for farmers that are interested in the Haney soil health test and quantifying your soil health, we still do that here at Continuum Ag. It's a smaller portion of what we do, but that's where I started the company as a soil health consulting company and specializing in the Haney soil health test. If you need some Haney testing done or are interested in doing that, interested in improving your fertilizer management for this 2025 season, send me a message or more so contact Sophia, Sophia at continuum.ag. We are getting the four-wheelers rolling and getting the starting to get soil samples going here for this spring batch. So if you're interested in that, contact us very quickly because time is really of the essence here as we want to get soil samples done and get recommendations created as you go into planting and needing better decisions made about side dress and that kind of thing. So with that being said, we will be back with more CI Chit Chats later on, and we'll keep driving this message here and more info coming soon as far as the IRS public comment period. So be ready for that, and we'll keep pushing full speed ahead to try to find the best opportunities that we can for farmers and for driving this conservation ag movement forward. So appreciate everyone taking the time. Have a great Tuesday. We'll talk to y'all later.